Hi, my name is Cindy. Here is my experience with a guy I had dreamed of spending the rest of my life with, but at some point, everything went south because of a terrible mistake I made. The whole thing just happened abruptly, and that was it. Our relationship of almost 3 years ended, but the truth is, I was to blame, and that is one more reason why I decided to share this story with you today. Perhaps you could possibly avoid those pitfalls I failed to circumvent. You see, the truth is, you may have control over your actions, but you may not have control over the consequences of your actions. I was a data entry clerk working for a private company from the comfort of my home when I met with a young, handsome guy named Cameron. He happens to be one of the staff members working with this private firm. They were into software development and data analysis, and he worked as a data analyst. He happened to be the leader of the team I freelance for, and I had to communicate with him directly to submit my work. Coincidentally, in the process of one of our communications, I kind of mentioned in passing the city I was working from, and surprisingly, it caught Cameron's attention. He delightfully informed me that he was based in the same city as me. I was really glad to hear that. Cameron immediately suggested we meet face-to-face going forward since we lived in the same city. We scheduled a date and finally met. I was thrilled and excited to meet him, and he was also fascinated to see my face. From that moment on, we continued working like that, meeting in a designated location to receive completed work and activate a new milestone. Eventually, we got used to working like that. One day, while I was done delivering a finished job to Cameron, he gave me a thumbs up for a job well done and then looked at me in the eyes and started telling me he had a huge crush on me that he really couldn't explain. He explained that it all started the first day he set his eyes on me. He went on, and when he was done, I said I'd think about it and get back to him. I wanted not to appear too cheap and chintzy, but the truth of the matter was that I'd been blushing over him ever since we met face to face and started working like that. I pulled his legs for 2 weeks before finally accepting his proposal. We started dating and got to find out about each other's backgrounds, personalities, and dreams. We did really spend quality time with each other to discuss salient issues that came up during the course of our relationship because I had a lot of breakups and disappointments in the past, and I wanted as much as possible to prevent those ugly scenarios from playing out this time around. One of the things I did was to put it straight to Cameron to define our relationship. What exactly are we up to? I asked. I had wanted to know if it was just a mere affair. A lot of people just date for the purpose of having fun, and I wasn't really ready for that. I was tired of all that stuff and wanted something definite, realistic, and time-bound. I also wanted a total change in the way we dated. Doing it differently. I really was not expecting those conventional approaches such as playing a card game, going to the movies, eating in restaurants, or going to the beach. I wanted something more mature and effective. Fortunately, Cameron happened to be on the same page with me. He told me clearly that his intention was to eventually settle down with me in marriage. Funny enough, he also narrated his own experiences, and it appeared we shared a lot of them in common. So we clearly defined our relationship and knew exactly what we were up to. It was a date for marriage. Soon enough, Cameron had introduced me to his family members. I got to speak with his mom at one point, and she told me she couldn't wait to see me in person. I got to know most of his friends and co-workers, and we had a cordial relationship. Indeed, our dating went beyond the ice cream licking, the movie watching, and all that stuff folks do. This is not to say there was anything wrong with all of that. I just wanted something more authentic and different from the status quo. So whenever we meet, we talk about the kind of home we want to build. We talked about the number of children we wanted to have. We talked about our dreams and aspirations, our goals, and how we possibly hoped to achieve them. We never entertained any trivial or frivolous idea all through the 3-year period we dated. All of my friends and Cameron's revered and liked the nature of our relationship, and they knew we were really going to end up together. At one point, we started talking about our health and physical fitness. We came up with different exercises and training we'll need to embark on to achieve our goals. Cameron decided to go to the gym and cycle, while I chose yoga and brisk walking. Soon enough, Cameron registered with both a gym outfit and a cycling club. I, in turn, signed up for a yoga class and started brisk walking every evening. I started my yoga classes without a single idea of what they entailed. I had only been hearing about yoga and how it improves strength, flexibility, and balance, and how it also helps the heart condition, but I never thought of the risks involved. So when I started, I was taught about the posture I had to assume when observing it, and I got to understand that it has to do with lots of meditation and mind travel. I struggled all through my first week of attendance and began to think of quitting. I told Cameron I couldn't just cope with all that meditation, posture, and mind travel stuff. He kind of encouraged me to persevere, assuring me that it's almost the same experience of rigor and austerity in every sport. It's not always easy and rosy at the onset, but as time goes on, one gets used to it. The following week, when I attended the yoga class, I was fascinated to meet some other new intakes they had. One among them was a fine, good-looking guy called Ed. He told me he was a bodybuilder but decided to enroll in yoga just to find a way to connect with the infinite intelligence and possibly reach emotional, psychological, and mental balance. I really liked the way he talked, and I derived some inspiration and motivation from him. Eventually, we began attending the classes together. As a matter of fact, he became my inspiration, which is why I stayed back and continued with the classes. When he was unavoidably absent, I hardly attended the classes. I really did not know how it all started, but it appeared that both of us began to have a strong crush on each other. After the classes, we stayed back to talk, crack jokes, and whatnot. He'd bought me a lot of gifts and given me cash gifts on many occasions. I never let Cameron know about all of these. I was really scared he would frown at it. One day, while we were returning from the yoga class, Ed suggested it would be a good idea if we branched out to his place so I could get to know where he lives. He added that I'll have to take him to my home too, so he can also get to know where I live. Without giving it a second thought, I agreed. We went to his home, and he welcomed me and treated me warmly. He actually had a small but cute home, and I noticed he had no wife or kids. I went through some of the large portraits in his photos and never saw anything that related to his family. While I sat on the sofa and admired the settings and decorations in his home, he suddenly pulled off his shirt and sat just beside me. One thing led to another, and we started having sex. While we were on it suddenly, my phone rang. I was immersed in pleasure and did not hesitate to pick up the call, but the phone kept on ringing, and I decided to check. It was Cameron, my boyfriend. I was starstruck and immediately pricked in the conscience. Suddenly, I found myself losing interest in what I was doing with Ed. Immediately, I stood up and sat somewhere by myself. Ed came around, trying to persuade me to continue, but I vehemently declined, and he asked to know who was calling. I told him it was my boyfriend. Ed went ahead to try to convince me to ignore Cameron and come along with him, but I turned down his proposal. I knew he was just an empty cheat who had just taken advantage of me and wanted to keep preying on me. Almost immediately, I told him I needed to leave. I was so embarrassed and ashamed of myself for cheating on Cameron, and I couldn't just stand my conscience. Ed tried to apologize to me for letting that happen, and I stood up and made my way to the door. He quickly changed his clothes to see me off. The moment he opened the door and I stepped out, there was Cameron right in front of us. Apparently, he had tracked my location through the GPS on my phone. He actually had an application on his phone that gave him real-time location alerts. When he got to Ed's home, the app signaled that I was there. All he did was patiently wait for me to come out of the house. When I saw him standing just beside his car, I couldn't believe my eyes. I wondered how he got to know I was there, but then I quickly remembered he works with a software development company. Immediately, I got uneasy, and my feet became so heavy and difficult to lift off the ground. Ed was wondering what was wrong with me, and I told him my boyfriend was right in front of us, and he began to fidget and fumble around. "What are you doing in a guy's house all by yourself?" Cameron asked in disappointment. I quickly told him I was sorry. I beckoned on him to calm down and not worry because nothing actually happened between me and Ed. I then introduced Ed as one of my yoga classmates, but Cameron would not buy into that lie. "What exactly do you mean by nothing happened?" he asked, and chuckled with such assurance and confidence that it couldn't be denied. Then, looking at me straight in the eyes, he asked, "Do you want me to give you proof?" I was immediately disoriented, and my body language and disposition began to betray me. I began to literally shake and couldn't go any further in trying to prove otherwise. I had no option but to quickly tell him what actually happened. I begged him and explained that it wasn't really my fault. I explained that I only came along with Ed to see where he was living, and then I got carried away by his macho build, and we ended up on the bed. I assured him I had never cheated on him throughout our relationship, and this was the first time it happened, and it was the first time I had sex with Ed since I got to meet him over a month ago. Ed stood quietly and listened as I spoke all the while, and when I was done, he tried to lend his voice to the whole matter. But once he started talking, Cameron yelled at him and shut him down. After trying to explain himself, Cameron kept interfering and yelling threats and curses. He angrily walked away. I stood in front of Cameron, not knowing what else to say. Then he demanded to know how I got to meet with Ed, and I told him we met at the yoga classes. Immediately, he asked me to get in the car. I did, and he furiously drove to our yoga place to see the yoga instructor. He demanded detailed information about Ed, and the yoga instructor was really reluctant at first to divulge such information about one of their students. But when Cameron explained that he meant no harm, he gladly obliged him, and off he started to find out about who Ed really was. It turned out he was really an old man who was 40 years older than I was, and he had a criminal record. It happened that Ed just had a good body built due to how he worked on himself to stay fit. I was really embarrassed and disappointed with myself. I just couldn't forgive myself for cheating on Cameron, and now I was on the verge of losing him. I immediately began to sob and cry just to gain Cameron's sympathy. I told him I was very sorry to cheat on him, but that it was the first time I'd ever done so. I assured him I would never do such a ridiculous thing going forward. He looked at me and laughed in doubt and mockery. "I don't know what you are talking about," he retorted. He went on, "I thought you wanted something different and better. How come you failed to curb and tame your passion and emotions? You can't eat your cake and have it. If you do want the best, then you have to prepare and sacrifice for the best. But from the look of things, I'm sure you don't deserve the best," he added. "I am not coming aboard that ship with you. I'm sorry." When he was done talking like that, he got into his car to drive away. I immediately burst into tears and cried out loud. I begged him not to leave me, but he pushed me away and drove off. I sat on the ground crying like a child, and some concerned fellows came around me to find out what was wrong. I told them my boyfriend had just abandoned me and driven away. They persuaded me and encouraged me to take heart. When I finally got home, I tried to call him, but he refused to pick up my calls. I sent him countless text messages explaining to him that it was a mistake and no one is above that, but he never responded. As though that were not enough, Cameron went ahead and terminated my contract with them. He had decided to break all ties with me. I thought of how to reach him without going to his house, and it dawned on me that all through the 3-year period we dated, I'd never visited his office, or even known where it was even located in the city. I had to quickly do research to ascertain their exact location. I did not want to go see him at his home because I knew he wouldn't listen to me. I wanted a situation where I could possibly talk to someone else, like his superior, just in case he starts acting up as usual. I got ready and went to see him at his office. When he saw me, he suddenly frowned at me and became uneasy. I started shedding tears and asked him what kind of person he was that wouldn't listen or find a place in his heart to forgive. He told me he had forgiven me already, but was not interested in the relationship any longer. Then I went ahead to find out why he suddenly terminated my contract with them. I asked how it was related to our relationship. I was really shocked when he told me that he had only allowed that contract to continue because he was dating me. He revealed that my work hadn't been satisfactory for a while now, and they had just been tolerating me. Once we broke up, he had the opportunity to immediately terminate the contract. I felt bad and wished I had just passed on. Knowing I had nothing to lose, I suddenly got mad at him, vented out my grievances and displeasure, and then walked away. He never answered a word. As I returned home, it dawned on me that I had just wasted my time yelling hate and curses at Cameron. I was to blame. I was to blame. I brought all of these on myself. I shouldn't have followed Ed to his home alone, not knowing who he really was. I shouldn't have allowed him to cuddle and caress me the moment he pulled off his shirt. I wondered what I was thinking about letting all that happen. Now, I have to start all over again. How long will I continue with all of these before I eventually get married? I decided to stay off every form of dating and relationship for a while. A few months later, I heard that Ed had been sent to jail. He was involved in an armed robbery attack someplace in the city where they attempted to rob a bank but were strongly accosted and overpowered by the police. They were eventually arrested, tried, and sent to rot in jail. The whole scenario sent some shivers down my spine. It dawned on me that I had been cheating on Cameron, my perfect boyfriend, with an armed robber who was 40 years older than me. I couldn't just get a hang of that. I was grateful that I had loosened ties with him before all of these things happened. I was also grateful to Cameron for breaking us up and severing the relationship. Perhaps I could have ended up with Ed in jail. My misdeeds and eventual breakup with Cameron kept on hunting me. At one time, we bumped into each other at an eatery, and we both pretended as though we never knew each other. Then suddenly, I saw a pretty lady walk into the eatery about 5 minutes later. Apparently, Cameron had gotten married to one of his former teammates who works for a different organization. They had planned to have lunch that afternoon in the eatery, and Cameron happened to come a little bit earlier than her. I sat in my seat and stared at them occasionally as they had their lunch. Cameron also occasionally tried to look at me clandestinely, and at a point I caught him doing that, and he smiled at me and said hi. I also smiled back and waved at them. Almost immediately, I walked out of that eatery, sad and depressed. I just imagine I could have been the one eating with him right in there, but here I am, still single, grappling with how to survive and make ends meet. It's just sad, and I couldn't wrap my head around that. I went home frustrated, and I wept for days. I then deleted Cameron's contact from my phone and burned up all the photos we had together.
Subscribe if you liked this video, and join if you want to get pro voiceover soon. Thank you for watching.